Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's Commander Precon Day for Streets of New Capenna. We are working our way through these decks, reviewing each of them, talking about all the sweet new cards, and we're up to the Jun deck. We covered Grixis and Bant yesterday, so we got 3 for today, which means we should probably jump right into it. Start talking about these spicy new Riveters cards. Before we do, 2 quick reminders. Number 1, if you want to keep up on all the latest spoilers throughout the day, you'll find them all over at mtdpreviews.com. Number 2, if you need a Streets of New Capenna Commander Precon or any New Capenna cards, or really any cards, you can get them from our awesome sponsor, Card Kingdom, by heading over to cardkingdom.com/mtdgoldfish and even get a free MTD Goldfish sticker. Anyway, let's talk Streets of New Capenna Commander. Alright, so we are talking about the Jun deck. This is the deck led by Henzi Toolbox Story, which we're not going to go into again. We already covered it in an old video. Click the card, check it out if you're interested. But Henzi kind of shows off what this deck is about, which is blitzing stuff, sacrifice synergies, some weird graveyard synergies. That's what we're going to be seeing with the rest of the cards in this deck. And we got 2 backup commanders in the deck, including a card that has already kind of sent shockwaves through the Magic market. This was a card that was leaked a while ago, and people immediately started buying out cards that would maybe go in this deck, and that is the Beamtown Bully. So Beamtown Bullies, 4 mana, 4/4, Vigilance, Haste, Ogre, Devil, Warrior, so many lines of text out there. The big deal is you can tap it to make target opponent whose turn it is reanimate a non-legendary creature from your graveyard. You give it haste, you goad it, so it has to attack someone who's not you, and then it gets exiled at the beginning of the next end step. So I think the intention of this card is to play it with blitz stuff. This is kind of a cute, like, blitz commander. You can blitz in your stuff, get your value out of your blitz card, and then give it to one of your opponents, and make them smash someone else with it, get in some more damage. So I think that's kind of the idea of the card. However, the way people are going to build this card is with cards that are really negative, either when they enter the battlefield or when they hit your opponent. So, for example, some of the cards that we've seen bought out because of Beamtown Bullies are like Leveler. Leveler, when it comes into play, you exile your entire library. So essentially, you mill this into your graveyard, loot it away, whatever. Beamtown Bullies it, and you essentially just kill someone. You make them exile their entire library, so that means they're going to mill out on their draw step, or like Eater of Days, when it comes into play, makes you skip your next turn. Hellcarver Demon makes you sack all your permanents when you hit your opponent with it. So these are the kind of cards I think people are going to play with Beamtown Bullies. These really negative, brutal ETB combat trigger stuff, taking advantage of the fact that Beamtown Bullies puts them into play and goads them. So it's a really neat commander. I love commanders like this that make janky, old, horrible cards playable. I'm not sure this might actually be too powerful, though. Like, I'm actually kind of worried about how easy it is to use this to just wreck one person. Like, it's not hard in black to tutor a Leveler in your graveyard. We got Buried Alive, we got Entombs. So something like Leveler, getting in the graveyard's easy, and then this comes down with haste, so as long as it lives through your turn, and you can just immediately kill someone. As soon as it goes to your next person's turn, you can activate it on their upkeep and put this into play before they draw for their turn and just make someone die. So I'm actually, like, really scared about how strong this can be. I think this is going to be stronger than most people expect if you build it in that mean negative ETB, negative combat damage style way, but still a really sweet design. We also got Jolene the Plunderer Queen, a 4 mana 2/2 human warrior that whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, the attacking player makes a treasure, and if you would create one or more treasures, you get that many +1 instead, and you can sack 5 treasures, put a 5 +1/+1 counters on Jolene. So this is kind of like a weird Curse of Opulence mixed with a Zorn. If there's one thing I've learned playing Curse of Opulence in Commander, it's that even that small amount of value, like getting a treasure token or a Curse of Opulence, technically it's gold, but essentially the same thing. But even that small amount of value is enough to make people attack the curse player. So I actually think that Jolene is going to do a pretty good job of keeping people from attacking you. It's not quite a ghostly prison, but it's not that far off because people are going to want to get that treasure token, so they're going to attack people other than you. So that's something to keep in mind. But it's worth mentioning, they really only got to attack one opponent with one creature to get the treasure, and they can still swing the rest of the stuff at you. And then Jolene's like this weird treasure Voltron commander. We got a lot of ways to turn treasures into extra stuff. Like Magna turns 5 treasures into a dragon or an artifact. Professional Facebreaker turns treasures into card draw. Stimulus package tokens. Grim Hireling turns them into removal. Jolene turns treasures into pumping. Like every treasure you sack is giving it +1/+1. You just got to do it in groups of 5, but it seems pretty easy with broken treasure cards in Commander, like maybe Dockside Extortionist, to make enough treasures that you can just give Jolene evasion. Use a Ranker and a Swiftfoot Boots or a Shadow Sphere or whatever. Play a Dockside, sack all the treasures, and just one-shot someone. So I think that's the idea of Jolene, is to have this be this weird, like, don't attack me. Attack each other to get the treasures, but I'm going to make this huge Jolene and one-shot you treasure Voltron-style Commander. We also got a new horror in Grim Gorger, a 4-mana 3/3 with Menace. So when it attacks, you get to exile up to 1 card of each card type from defending player's graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on Grim Gorger for each card exiled this way. So this means when you attack, this can get a creature, a land, an instant, a sorcery. Think of Tarmogoyf. The same card types that work with Tarmogoyf, that's what you can exile with Grim Gorger. If your opponents have a full graveyard, this can actually get pretty big pretty quick. If you hit all the card types available, this can go from a 3/3 to a 9/9, a 10/10, an 11/11 in one turn and keep growing like that throughout the game. Although I will say, a little awkward that it's in the wrong colors for Umbris. Umbris is like the horror commander right now. Everyone's building horrors with Umbris. Grim Gorger doesn't actually work there, so I think this is probably a card for like Golgari counters deck. Stick it in like Skullbriar, Rayhand, maybe Crash could be another good option, because you're probably gonna have +1/+1 counter synergies, and that's the easiest way to make Grim Gorger even better. If you got a doubling season, then you're getting 2 counters for each card type exiled, so this will just get massive really quick. So I don't think this card's like overpowered, but one thing I love is cards that give incidental graveyard hate, and this is a big enough threat that I think it's worth considering, and it's a way you just incidentally deal with your opponent's graveyards. We also got a new wall in Weathered Sentinels, 3-mana 2/5, Defender, Vigilance, Reach, Trample. What a set of abilities. Why would we want our Defender to have all those mechanics? Well, it can attack players who attacked you during their last turn as though it didn't have Defender, and when it attacks, it gets +3/+3 and gains Indestructible. So it's going to be a 5/8 trampling, vigilant, reach attacker, and it can attack whoever attacks you. So this is kind of giving you some protection. Again, not a ghostly prison, but this is a reason for your opponent not to attack you, because if they do, they might get smashed back for a lot of damage. However, I don't think this is really a strong enough form of protection to just play this in a generic deck. Where this is going to shine, though, is in Defender decks, in Toughness Matters decks, in Butt style decks. So this is like a great addition to Arcades, let's say. It's a wall, so it works with Arcades, or a Defender, so it works with Arcades, and it's just going to be really big. If you're dealing damage equal to its toughness rather than its power, then this is hitting for 8, and it's indestructible. Could also go in like Doran or Geralf or E-Honda, so any sort of Toughness Matters style deck. So probably not good enough just to throw in a generic deck, but if you have wall synergies, Defender synergies, Toughness synergies, this is actually a really powerful option. We also got Next of Kin, a 3-mana aura that enchants a creature, and when enchanted creature dies, you can put a creature with lesser mana value from your hand or command zone onto the battlefield, and if you do, you return Next of Kin to the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of the next end step. So kind of a slow value-y sacrifice engine, and I think that's probably where this fits. Something like Korvald, Marin, Mazarek, anything that's going to be sacrificing creatures repeatedly, you can get value out of this, especially since it keeps coming back from the graveyard, and it's really nice that you can use it to cheat a commander into play. This is a way you can potentially cheat on the command tag if you can get this on something that is bigger than your commander. It needs to be higher mana value, but still, when that dies, you get back your commander cheating on the command tags, which is especially relevant for commanders that tend to die a lot. Like Korvald, everyone knows they got to kill this right away or it's going to kill them. Same with Marin, the value adds up really quickly. So I think it's especially good there. The other place I think this card is good is as an upgrade for the weird Auras, Matters, Gruul commanders that we got in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So if you're playing like Kima or Shishiro, I feel like this is almost an auto include, because remember, this doesn't say enchant a creature you control, so you can potentially put this on one of your opponent's big creatures and then kill that creature, wait for it to die, and get something into play, get your commander into play or something. So it works really well with Kima in specific that cares about you putting auras on your opponent's creatures. So I think those are the two possibilities for this card. It's a little slow, it's grindy, it doesn't come back into play until the next end step, so there's not really combo potential, but in the right shell can definitely still be a very powerful effect. We also got Reign of Riches. 4-mana enchantment, comes into play, make 2 treasures, and the first spell you cast each turn with mana from a treasure has Cascade. So essentially, Reign of Riches is a very, very easier to cast Maelstrom Nexus, but you gotta be a treasure deck to take advantage of it. So if you're playing a deck that's gonna have treasures around, doubly so if you care about cascading, but I think this is just a fun, nice value inclusion that's probably gonna be worth it if you got enough treasures to trigger it consistently. We also got Mizio Mugger, a 5-mana 3/3 with Blitz of 3 that says whenever it attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, and you may play those cards as turn, and you can spend mana as well as mana of any color to cast those spells. So Mezio's Mugger, it's kind of really bad at Tally. Like, a Tally does the same thing, except you have to cast the non-land cards without paying their mana cost. Mezio Mugger, you do get a discount, especially if you blitz it, but you actually have to spend the mana to cast those cards, which makes it way, way worse. We also got, speaking of blitz cards, Waves of Rats. Waves of Rats, 4-mana 4/2 trample. When it dies, if it dealt combat damage to a player this turn, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, and you can blitz it for 5. So essentially, you can blitz it, and then if you hit someone with it, it's going to come back into play after you sacrifice it to blitz. You get to draw the blitz card, so that's a fine little synergy as it is. I think this is another card that's good for blitz style decks, good for Zatora, good for Marchesa Blitz, and also a sneaky addition to Rats, because Rats also have a lot of sacrifice synergies. Like Maronar wants to sack a rat to make X rats, where X is the number of rats you control. So it's just a way you can like blitz in your Wave of Rats, hit your opponent, sack it to Maronar, make a bunch of rats, and then you're going to get back your Wave of Rats anyway. Your Patron of Nezumi wants to have a rat offering, so you can kind of sacrifice this for free and then get it back anyway as long as you hit someone. Even Ink Eyes doesn't really have any specific synergies, but if you're playing Ink Eyes Rats, like, it's still a good rat. Rat Tribal needs as many good rats as it can get, and this is pretty good for a rat. Next up, we got a wacky red enchantment in Turf War, 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, each player puts a contested counter on a land they control, and then when a creature deals combat damage to a player, if that player has 1 or more lands with contested counters on them, that creature's controller gains control of one of their lands of their choice, and they get to untap it. So this is the Monarchy for lands, essentially the same way that the Monarchy works, where someone's going to get the crown, and then if they get hit for combat damage, that player gets the crown. This is kind of going to do the same thing with lands. There's going to be 4 lands, at least, with counters on them, and then people are going to be stealing their lands, passing them around the table, which is pretty sweet. I think that's a funny mechanic. I don't know how strong it is unless you build around it a little bit, but it is a nice chaos mechanic. I think that's probably the easiest home, is maybe just playing a straight up chaos deck, Oaken or Rakdos or whatever. Also seems really sweet in Zedru. Zedru actively wants your opponents to gain control of your permanents, because then they draw you cards, and you can give opponents control of permanents that you control, so you can like steal lands and then give them back to your opponents or whatever. So there's some synergies there. The other possibility with this card is try to actually build around it. Like, you can try to steal your opponent's lands forever. If you have something like Resourceful Denial or Ferropede or Hex Parasite, like, you can play this, hit your opponent, steal their lands with a counter, and then just remove the counter from that land. So that's another way to build around this. So I think Turf War, it's a really fun card. I think it'll mostly show up in Chaos decks. I don't think it's like super duper strong though. We also got Industrial Advancement, a 4-mana enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, you may sack a creature. If you do, look at the top X cards of your library where X is a creature's mana value, and you may put a creature from among them on the battlefield, the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this is kind of like a weird Sunbird's Invocation style enchantment, and it's designed to work specifically with Blitz cards. Because Blitz, remember, you gotta sacrifice your thing on your end step anyway. So what you do if you're playing Henzi or Jaxus or whatever, is you can blitz in your creature, and then on your end step, you're going to get 2 triggers. You're going to get the Industrial Advancement trigger, you're going to get the Blitz Sacrifice trigger. Well, if you stack those right, you can sacrifice your creature to Industrial Advancement, because it's going to die anyway thanks to Blitz, and then get another creature on the battlefield. Also worth noting, there is no mana value restriction on this card. Like, you can put any creature you hit on the top of your library into play, so this means you can theoretically be sacrificing a Jaxus, and if you have like a big Eldrazi on the top of your deck, you get to put it into play, which is pretty scary. So Industrial Advancement, along with working with Blitz, works with a bunch of other decks as well. It works with like Ryona, making token copies of effects. They're going to go away on your end step. You might as well sacrifice them. You can use it with like Perforos, Luca Copperco Outcast. They're sneaking big creatures into play, and they're going to go away on your end step anyway, so then you just sacrifice that creature, get another big creature, Feldin, Verticlad, kind of another sweet synergy. So I think that Industrial Advancement, actually a really powerful effect. If you have temporary creatures that are going to be going away on your end step anyway, this is an all-star enchantment. Imagine sneaking something big into play with Perforos, and then getting in the combat damage, and then sacrificing it to Industrial Advancement to get something big that's going to stick around forever. Like, that's the kind of power this card has. We also got Protection Racket, a new 3-mana enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, repeat the following process for each opponent in turn order. Reveal the top card of your library. That player may pay life equal to the card's mana value. If they do, exile that card, otherwise put it in your hand. So this is a really, really interesting design. We've seen Phyrexian Arena, which draws you a card each turn and loses you a life, be basically a commander staple. Drawing 1 extra turn, even at the cost of 1 life, is worth it on a 3-mana enchantment. This has potential to be so much more, since it's triggering on each opponent. If only one of those opponents decide not to pay the life and give you the card, you're getting a Phyrexian Arena. It's also kind of like Sin Prodder, except it scales up for the entire table, so each of your opponent's going to do it. On the other hand, this is a card where if you reveal lands, it's going to be pretty bad. If you're revealing low mana value stuff, your opponent's probably going to be like, okay, I'll take the 1, I'll take the 2, doesn't really matter. So we'll have to wait and see. I think it's going to be at its best in a few styles of decks. One is decks with big things. Decks like Eureka, your opponent's probably not going to be able to afford to pay, 13 life for your Emrakul or whatever, 15 life for your Shadow Immortality, so they're probably going to have to let you draw it. I mean, I don't know how valuable drawing that is, but it's still an extra card in hand, and then you can scroll Racket or Sensei's Divining Top It or whatever. It's also good in something like Mogus. If you can pressure your opponent's life total, this card gets even better, because then your opponent's not going to really have the option to pay the life to keep you from getting the cards. If you get your opponent low enough on life, the choice becomes very hard. If your opponent's at 40 life, sure, whatever, I'll take the 2, I'll take the 3, I'll take the 4, don't draw the card. But once you get your opponent down to 10 life, then it's actually a really, really tough choice. The other place to play this is in a deck like Rakdos that doesn't really care what your opponent chooses. Like, if your opponent gives you the card, that's great. If your opponent takes the damage, well, that's great, because then you're getting a huge discount on your creature spells with Rakdos. So I actually think Protection Racket, I think it's going to be really good. I think this is a card that I'm just going to try jamming in all my black decks in the Phyrexian Arena slot. We'll have to wait and see. Maybe it ends up not being good enough. Maybe you hit too many lands. Maybe your opponents pay the life too much and you don't draw cards. But I think that this has a chance to potentially be an upgrade over Phyrexian Arena. Worst case, it's definitely good in decks that are built around it. We also got First Responder, a 4-mana 3/3 that says at the beginning of your end step, you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand, and then put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that creature's power on First Responder. So this is another way to work with your blitz cards. You can blitz in a card, and rather than sacrificing it, before it sacrifices it, bounces it back to your hand. So if you're playing blitz in specific, I think this is a pretty good card. The other place it could be pretty good is with like sneak attack style effects. We talked about some of these effects earlier, sneak attack, killer instinct, Perforos, things that put a creature into play, and then it makes you sacrifice them on your end step. Sneak attack, for example, you can put your Emrakul the Promised End into play, whatever, Ulamog, whatever big thing you want, hit someone with it, and then on your end step, rather than sacrificing it, bounce it back to your hand and make your First Responder absolutely massive. Like if you're picking up a 10-10, a 13-13, First Responder is going to get huge really, really quick. So that's the other place I like this. Basically the same things we've been talking about with these other cards. If you have synergies that put creatures into play temporarily and make you sack them on your end step, First Responder is going to be a really good card. Otherwise, probably doesn't do enough. We also got Dodojalopy, another new vehicle, 3-mana star 5 trample. Its power is equal to the highest mana value among creatures you control. Crew it for 3, scavenge it for 3. Meh. I think that Dodojalopy, not really interested in it outside of a dedicated scavenge deck. If you're playing like Veril's Scavenge or something, this is pretty cute. Otherwise, seems like one of the lower powered vehicles from the set. We also got Bellowing Mauler, a 5-mana 4/6 Ogre Warrior. This says at the beginning of your end step, each player loses 4 life, and then unless they sacrifice a non-token creature. So Bellowing Mauler, I think this is another card that, if you're playing Blitz, it's good. Or those other synergies where you gotta sacrifice something on your end step anyway, temporary tokens or whatever. Otherwise, it is symmetrical. It is hitting you just as much as it's hitting your opponents. So I think you really gotta have something free to sacrifice. The Jaxus that you blitz into plays, a Taurus Envoy or something. Then it's okay. So I don't know, maybe you could play it in Mogus because it plays with the Punisher theme of Mogus. But really, I feel like there's just better things you can be doing. Like you could be playing an actual Grave Pack. Grave Pack deck, when you blitz a creature, on your end step, it's going to die. Each of your opponent's going to have to sacrifice a creature. There's no choice. There's no losing for life. It's not going to hit on you. So I feel like this is just, I don't know, budget Grave Pact, maybe bad Grave Pact, pre-con Grave Pact. But if you're actually building around the blitz mechanic, I feel like there's easy ways to upgrade this slot. Finally today, we got our Jund Confluence, Riveteer's Confluence. So 5 mana sorcery, choose 3, can choose each mode more than once if you want. Draw a card and lose a life, deals 1 damage to each creature and planeswalker you don't control, or put a land card from your hand or graveyard on the battlefield tapped. If you think about this card, I think in a generic sense, it's not very good. Like, let's say you choose the draw mode 3 times, it's a 5 mana Painful Truths. Let's say you choose draw a card, put a land into play, and 1 damage to anything. You're kind of getting a Growth Spiral, a 2 mana instant for 5 mana that also pings everything. I guess you could throw in an extra card draw maybe. So I feel like in a generic sense, especially at sorcery speed, the card is pretty underpowered, but if you have specific synergies, I think it can be good. Most obviously, I think this is a great Lord Windgrace card. The most powerful mode is going to be putting 3 lands into play. It's not even non-basic lands, and a deck like Lord Windgrace often has a lot of lands in the graveyard, so if you are triple ramping with this card, I think it can actually be pretty powerful, especially if you throw in some landfall synergies like 3 extra land drops with a Scoot Swarm out, or Avenger Zendikar, probably going to win the game. So I wouldn't just jam this in any deck of its colors. They're just better options. If you're a Jund deck, cast Painful Truths for your card draw, or cast an Anger of the Gods if you want to have a bad sweeper. But if you can triple ramp with this and you have landfall synergies, then it actually becomes pretty exciting. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our Jund pre-con deck. So what do you think of this deck? Where do you rank it? We're 3 decks in, 2 more to go in the near future. Which one's your favorite so far? Which cards you hype for? What are you doing with them? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back soon with another Commander review. So until then, have a great one, and I will talk to you soon.